One of the hardest parts of building transit is finding the space for it. Buying land or using eminent domain is slow, expensive, and politically tricky. So when a city already has a corridor ready to go, that's a gift. It could save billions, avoid years of political battles, and keep homes and businesses in place. Philadelphia is one of those cities. In the northeast of the city lies a wide, yet constantly congested arterial road called Roosevelt Boulevard. Some segments carry tens of thousands of vehicles every day, and even with 12 lanes at its widest, people still spend hours stuck in traffic. Transit along this corridor made enough sense that a rail line was proposed as early as 1913, when the boulevard was just being developed. Even though that early plan didn't advance, planners left a wide median for transit to be added on it in the future. On paper, it's a no-brainer. Yet after multiple attempts, there still isn't a subway running down Roosevelt Boulevard. So how did it come to this point? Why is the Roosevelt Boulevard subway still needed today? And what does the story of this line teach us about building transit across the country? To answer that, we need to look at the corridor itself. Stretching roughly 14 miles, Roosevelt Boulevard runs from the north side of the city northeast towards the city limits. The neighborhoods along it are home to nearly 500,000 residents, creating significant transit demand. Every day, commuters scrub through traffic here. Many residents rely heavily on transit, yet access is limited and slow. Bus Rail 14, which serves part of the corridor, carries over 12,000 riders daily, and those buses move inch by inch in the same gridlock as cars. And congestion is only part of the story. Roosevelt Boulevard is consistently ranked as one of the city's most dangerous roads, with frequent crashes and challenging conditions for pedestrians and cyclists. Roads like this exist all across the country, but Roosevelt Boulevard has something most of them don't: space that was intentionally reserved for transit over a century ago. Planners saw growth coming and left a wide median down the center of the boulevard, expecting a rail line to eventually run there. In other words, the corridor was built for this, and yet, despite that foresight, the subway never materialized. As early as 1913, a subway along Roosevelt Boulevard was on the table. Planning stalled during World War I and the Great Depression. In the 1960s, the idea resurfaced. This time, it nearly became reality. A station shell was even built at Adams and Whitaker Avenue in anticipation of the line. The budget shortfalls killed the project before tracks were ever laid. In 2003, another formal study projected roughly 124,000 daily boardings and estimated that more than 83,000 car trips could be removed from the road. The benefits were clear, but the funding wasn't. Once again, the project was shelved. The most recent attempt was in 2003, after the collapse of I-95 in northeast Philadelphia exposed the fragility of the region's transportation network. The subway was studied yet again. City Council held hearings. Elected officials, advocates, and residents voiced support. And yet once again, price tag proved too high. The line was stalled. Wars and economic downturns delayed the project in the past, but in recent decades, a different set of obstacles has kept the Roosevelt Boulevard subway from moving forward. On paper, the cost challenges seem straightforward. Recent planning work suggests a subway through this corridor could cost well into the billions. Estimates commonly cited in the low to mid-tens of billions of dollars, depending on design and scope. That's expensive, especially when compared to alternatives like dedicated rapid bus lanes or light rail, which are projected to cost a fraction of that amount. Part of the reason for the high bill is the infrastructure itself. Even though Roosevelt Boulevard's wide median could reduce some expenses by avoiding costly land acquisition and displacement, it doesn't eliminate the core cost of building heavy rail transit. Tunnels, stations, tracks, signaling, etc. all add up. And that's one of the reasons this project has struggled to jump from study to shovel-ready status. Federal funds typically pay only part of the cost, and local agencies like SEPTA often have limited capital budgets. But here's the more nuanced truth. Even very expensive transit projects do get built in some places. Multi-billion-dollar subway expansions, like New York's 2nd Avenue Subway, have advanced with federal and local funding partnerships, so cost alone doesn't fully explain why this line hasn't moved forward. There's a deeper set of structural and political dynamics shaping which projects get funded and which don't. And that's where this story really begins to reveal itself. To understand this, we need to look at how SEPTA, Philadelphia's main transit operator, is funded. Unlike some cities with dedicated transit taxes, SEPTA relies on a patchwork of federal grants, state allocations, and smaller local contributions. Federal funding typically covers only part of a major project. The rest must come largely from the state. But Pennsylvania does not provide a stable, predictable transit funding stream. In theory, operating and capital budgets are separate. In practice, they can collide. In 2025, SEPTA was approved to use nearly $400 million in capital funds, money meant for long-term projects, just to avoid service cuts. That's funding that could have gone towards modernization or expansion. Don't get me wrong, maintaining the existing system is necessary, but this shows how tight the situation is. Every dollar used to keep buses and trains running is a dollar not available for building something new. And you can't expand transit if you can't sustain what you already have. Then there's the bigger issue: who decides where transportation money goes? Major funding decisions happen in Harrisburg, the capital city of Pennsylvania. Urban transit projects don't just compete against their own price tag, they compete against highway expansions, rural infrastructure, and other regional priorities across the entire state. Even when governors propose major increase in transit funding, legislative gridlock can stall it. In that system, engineering, feasibility, and ridership demand aren't enough. Political alignment becomes just as important. The Roosevelt Boulevard Subway isn't failing because it's impossible to build. The corridor has the space, the density, and the demand. The tools needed to make a project like this possible do exist, but in Pennsylvania's current funding and political structure, they haven't been fully used. Right now, transportation, housing, and street design are all handled separately. None of these decisions are connected, but they could be. Here's how it works. When building the transit, also build more housing and do a road redesign of Roosevelt Boulevard and nearby streets to improve walkability and safety in the surrounding neighborhoods. The new housing, along with a dense and walkable neighborhood, will not only provide more ridership for the new transit line, the increase in land value will generate tax revenue that could pay for the transit project itself. So instead of being dragged on in a political fight, the project could be more self-sustaining. While official efforts to move the Roosevelt Boulevard Subway forward have mostly stalled, it doesn't stop local advocates and organizations' passion in making the line a reality. The Roosevelt Boulevard Subway already has a ridership demand to justify the cost. Pair that with new housing and walkable neighborhoods along the line and potential land value capture to pay for itself. Roosevelt Boulevard Subway is an absolute no-brainer that should be completed. And this isn't just a Philly story. Cities across America, beautiful cars, face the same challenge. Atlanta has tracks, growth, and congestion. There's still no commuter rail. Sound familiar?